UK Oil and Gas is a British oil and gas company listed on AIM and with a portfolio of direct and indirect investments in 11 UK onshore assets located in the south of England. I am joined by Stephen Sanderson, the chairman of the company. Hello, Stephen.
Hello, Charlotte. Pleasure to be here.
Stephen, let's talk about your portfolio because it's in three parts, isn't it?
Yes, very clear three sort of part structure to the company. The first, and that sort of underlies the value, is our stable production from 4 fields. Plus, we have 3 oil discoveries which we're going to develop. One fairly soon, Markos Wood. Then we have conventional exploration, which actually is quite exciting for us. The biggest targets being in the Isle of Wight. That gives us exposure to about 30 million barrels net. And then, of course, what most people want to talk about is tight oil and Horse Hill and the Weald. And that's a very significant growth aspect of the portfolio.
Tell us more about the Weald Basin. We're talking big figures there.
Yeah, we're talking big numbers. You have to understand that when you're looking at these types of deposits, the reason that the large numbers are there is because we're dealing with the rocks where the oil is generated. The oil has not moved from where it's generated, so you're looking at numbers with billions at the end.
Now, it's true, Stephen, that the company has been making headlines several times this year around this Horse Hill discovery near Gatwick. You described it as a world-class oil and gas find, so remind us of your involvement there and what's been found so far.
Well, as you know, we're an active party in the Horse Hill Development Limited Consortium. UKOG drives the technical aspect of that, and we drilled the Horse Hill number 1 last November. And there were 2 aspects to that well, 2 outcomes. Firstly, we made a discovery in the shallow Portland section, a discovery about 20 odd million barrels of oil in the ground, a few million barrels recoverable. But underlying that, we found what I think is a game changer for the geology and for the resource potential of the Weald Basin and the southeast of England. Skipping back, it was always thought that the Weald Basin, the shales within that basin were not buried deep enough to have generated significant volumes of oil. And probably the biggest finding from the Horse Hill well was that that's actually untrue. We found that the rocks have certainly been buried deep enough to be well within the oil window, and the analysis of the data from the well, undertaken by world-class experts such as Schlumberger and Newtek, show that there is a very significant volume of oil in the ground. The first estimates that were undertaken by Schlumberger and Newtek basically equated to about between 9 and 11 billion barrels existing in the ground in the 55 square mile area of our licenses. And I should really stress that this is oil in the ground. It's got to be extracted. So it's not reserves, so it's oil in the ground. Now clearly, to move forward on this, and we'll touch on it later, we have to establish that we can get the oil out, and we'll be doing that in a flow test in the coming months.
Okay, but do you have an idea about the recovery rates currently?
Yes, we have an indication because both Newtek, from their extensive experience in similar rocks in producing areas in tight oil in the United States. Yeah, and also the US Energy Department has published figures this year that show that similar rocks in the United States, as the same numbers as Newtek, we're looking at between 3 and 8% recoveries of the oil in the ground. And so our target is around about 5%. So that's 5% of a large number is still a large number, shall we say.
So what's down there in Horse Hill?
Okay, Newtek did a very rigorous study using 86 wells over the entire Weald area. That was done at the end of October and released to the market. That showed that over the entire Weald area, about 1,200 square miles, there was 124 billion barrels in the ground. Of that, we have eight licenses which fall in that 1,200 square mile area. And the oil in the ground that relates to our licenses amounts to about 16 billion barrels. Of that, our net sort of working interest, if you like, is about 4 billion. So when we look back to the sort of target of 5% recovery, that's, that could be 200 million barrels recoverable net to us. Now that's a technical recoverable, and that would assume that you can drill as many wells as you like, which probably in reality is not the case. It's important to understand that our focus in the whole of this is actually within limestones, two sort of 100-foot limestones within this very large shale package, the shale package being about 700-foot aggregate thickness of containing oil. So within that, we focused on two limestones. Now, the oil in the ground in those limestones is actually about 20 billion barrels. So over the wheel, that target is, it's a billion barrels or so target. In our licenses itself, we're looking at recoverable from that limestone of about 30 to 50 million barrels, which for a small company like us is definitely a game changer. So I think I can only reiterate again that this is oil in the ground, and that we have to progress to try and get it to the surface. We'll be doing that. The first step will be with the Horse Hill flow test. And we're sufficiently encouraged that we'll be participating in another well next year in the block adjacent to it, which we've just completed a farm-in on, in the Holmwood well, which has very similar potential. And then ultimately we'll have to go and drill horizontal wells.
Okay. Now, given the geology of the site, I would like to know how you are going to recover this oil. Okay,
well, I think, as I said, our focus is on limestones, not shales. So, and the reason we're focusing on the limestone is, one, because they're actually a slightly better reservoir. They're tight, but they have slightly better oil deliverability possibilities, shall we say. But clearly, this is a tight rock, so the only way you get commercial flow rates is you have to stimulate them. The nice thing about limestones is that there's a lot of techniques out there that you can use to stimulate limestones without massive hydraulic fracking. So basically what we intend to do to get this oil out, to recover it, is to utilize conventional stimulation methods which are used in limestone fields. Particularly, actually, it's very similar to the process being used in the Witch Farm field down in Dorset, which is, I guess it's still Europe's largest conventional onshore oil field.
Okay. So what's required then to advance the Horse Hill project?
Okay, well, as I've said before, number one step is to flow test the well. We are waiting for the Environment Agency approval. I have spoken at length with them in the last couple of weeks. They assure me that they are progressing this as quickly as they can. I've also engaged with appropriate people and departments in government who will hopefully speed us on our way. But again, we're looking at doing this in the next couple of months. It is a reality. And as soon as we get the approval, we'll do it as soon as we can.
We've been focusing on the Horse Hill, obviously your flagship project. What about the other exciting discoveries and leads in your portfolio? Okay,
well, I mentioned that underlying the portfolio, we have development and production assets. Probably the next step for us, and quite an exciting, important one, is actually the development of our first oil field at Marquards Wood. That's about 1.5 million barrels net to us, P50, sort of average recoverable. But it has considerable upside, maybe up to 3 or 4 million barrels. And we'll be submitting a field development plan to the Oil and Gas Authority, putting in a new planning consent in the early part of next year. And we'll hope to drill that as soon as we get the planning authorities to give us consent. I mentioned that we have a conventional exploration component to our portfolio. Probably the most exciting part of that is on the Isle of Wight. We have a very large prospect there, which is unimaginatively called the M prospect. It sort of straddles offshore and onshore. It has objectives in the Portland, which is very similar to Horse Hill, except it's a limestone, not a sandstone. But underlying that, there's a deeper Triassic sandstone reservoir, in fact the same sandstone reservoir as in Witch Farm. And that potentially gives us a net recoverable target of about 30 million barrels. So that, again, that's quite a game changer for the company if that works.
Now, Stephen, given all the exciting assets that you seem to have in your portfolio, and the figures we have been talking about, they're quite extraordinary when it comes to Horse Hill. So do you feel that the share price currently fully reflects the potential of the company?
Well, I'd have to say no, wouldn't I? But no, I think it's really important that people understand that the focus is always on Horse Hill, and it's as you say, is it it's a flagship, or is it the flagship? It's a very key part of our portfolio, but people tend to overlook the fact that we have a significant amount of very good assets. The producing assets that we have from the 4 fields. And the development assets, which include Markwell's Wood, Baxter's Copse, and also the shallow Portland conventional discovery from Horse Hill. That gives us net about 4 million barrels with an upside of about 8 million barrels. And in my mind, that more than underpins the share price that we see. So therefore, I see that all the other upside that we have, the tight oil, the conventional oil, basically can only give us room for growth and equity growth in the company. So yes, I'd say that we're undervalued.
Okay, well, Stephen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Charlotte.
Stephen Sanderson, the chairman of UK Oil and Gas.